Hello everyone and welcome to today's mission, which will lead us back to Reddit to reading Why Humans Avoid War. I have read 8 chapters yesterday, I'm going to read a few chapters today. Don't know how many though, so there is a very high chance that there will be a third and maybe even a fourth stream for reading this. First I'm T-posing. One moment. I'm doing this so I don't have that much resource used, because it is very resource heavy to use the arm tracking. And some background music, or background sounds. How's everyone doing? I hope you all had a wonderful Christmas Eve. And those that do unpack their packages in the morning of the 25th, I hope you had wonderful packages and a wonderful unpacking time. Now, while I watch my CPU die, Chapter 9. The sleek outline of the Terran flagship loomed ahead on the view screen. Our sensors failed to detect any damage or deviation from normal function, even at close range. But our hails to the Terran ships requesting status updates had gone unanswered for hours now. The radio silence from the fleet was out of character, and I had begun to fear the worst. A shuttle was sent to re-establish contact with the humans, and to render aid if necessary. I opted to accompany the team, despite the possible risk to my safety. It was uncommon for a high-ranking officer like myself to partake in a rescue mission, but I felt as if I owed them my presence. I figured if the roles were reversed, Commander Rykov wouldn't be watching from the sidelines. He would be helping in any way he could. What could have caused the Terrans to cease all communications without any explanation? It wasn't totally unexpected that something had gone wrong with the plan, of course. The logistics of evacuating thousands of civilians in minutes were impractical, if not impossible. I recalled my brief deployment to the Yatari lunar colony when an inbound asteroid forced a mandatory evacuation. Despite government warnings, many people were reluctant to abandon their homes. Those that did leave in the initial rush funneled into a single spaceport, leading to congestion and delays. It had taken days to clear out all of the inhabitants, and we set for stragglers down to the last moment. From my experience, the only hope of completing the mission in the time allotted was divine intervention. Yet Commander Rykov seemed so confident, and had brushed off my objections as if they were trivial. How could I press him further when the humans had delivered time and again on their impossible promises? Had I listened to my instincts, perhaps the current predicament could have been avoided. Now we were sailing into possible danger without the faintest idea what we might be facing. The pilot, a young female named Dari, cleared her throat. "Sir, our sensors picked up 2 readings consistent with plasma rounds. Closing quickly." My antenna twitched with surprise. Who was even shooting at us? The only ships in our vicinity were the Terrans, but they had never shown an inclination to attack. There had to be another explanation. "Engagement evasive maneuvers," I barked. "No time." She pressed a few buttons, likely diverting all power to shields. "Brace for impact." Best case scenario, the shuttle would sustain heavy damage. The small clunker wasn't designed to take direct hits from a railgun. Worst case, well, we'd all be dead. The next few moments stretched on for what felt like an eternity, and as my anxiety swelled, I struggled to maintain my composure. My instincts screamed at me to do something, even if it were futile. Nothing was worse than waiting, helpless to avert your demise. "Sir, the rounds missed us, narrowly," Dari said. "Angle was any lower, they would have clipped the shields." Relief flooded through my veins, followed by confusion. "What? I'm not complaining, but we shouldn't have been a difficult target. Where did the shots come from? The Terran flagship, she replied. No, that's impossible. The only vessels in the area were human. But I still couldn't believe that they would fire on us. They must be hacked by the AI. Or maybe they were hijacked. We have to help them immediately. Dari shifted, looking uncomfortably. With respect, I doubt that's the case. There was no distress signal, nor signs of a breach, and no change in computer functions. I don't understand. I don't know why either, sir. But maybe the speaker was right. Right about what? A species that aggressive will attack just for the hell of it. We never should have trusted the humans. My mind was reeling. The evidence indeed pointed to the Terrans acting of their own volition. Dari was correct. I would never ascribe to the speaker's ideas of aggression, given that she had directed them at my own species in the past. But her warnings that the humans would turn on us were prophetic in light of the current situation. Perhaps they were just using me to gain access to the stealth ships all along. Once I had fulfilled that purpose, they had no reason to pretend to be allies anymore. While that explanation made sense given the circumstances, it didn't ring true in my mind. These were people that just yesterday I considered friends, that I would have entrusted with my life. I don't know whether I was just being stubborn, but I still found myself seeking another answer. How will we respond, sir? Dari broke the silence. They fired at us, which is a declaration of war. Under rules of engagement we are authorized they don't miss, I stated. She seemed mystified by the comment. Clearly, they did miss, sir. Not by much. There's a first for everything. I don't think they ever meant to hit us. I narrowed my eyes. If they wanted us dead, we'd be dead. Hail the Terran ships again. But, sir, I don't think your objection is noted, Dari. Now carry out my orders at once. If the humans didn't answer this time, I wasn't sure what to do. It was obvious that something had changed during the course of their mission. I needed to know what happened before we ended up in a dogfight with the galaxy's premier military power. Commander Rykov appeared on screen. His arms were crossed, and his eyes were narrowed to slits. Judging by his expression, if we were meeting in person, he would have tried to punch me in the face. I had no idea what I had done to merit such hostility. I tried to placate the human with a friendly smile. There must be some sort of misunderstanding, because I'm pretty sure you just shot at us. His skull deepened. That was a warning shot. The next one is getting buried in your hull. Orders be damned. Leave. Now. We just came to help, I protested. We were worried about you. Really? That's why you sabotaged the ships? Rykov scoffed. That's ridiculous. I did no such thing. I guess you thought we wouldn't recover the ships after you shot them down. It's plainly obvious from the computer logs that there was a remote override of the stealth protocol by someone with level 9 clearance, which is only held by the highest-ranking Federation General. I was stunned by what I was hearing. The humans believed that I, their most ardent supporter, had disabled the vortex ships? Never would I do such a thing. But if they had evidence to back that conclusion, I wasn't sure how to persuade them. This had to be some sort of setup. Listen, it wasn't me. We can't figure this out together, I pleaded. The commander shook his head. Save it. 3 of my men died because of you. We should kill you. But us shooting down a Federation ship is just the thing Ula needs to throw us out. A gasp escaped my lips as realization dawned on me. Ula. She has level 9 clearance too. Wait, she does? That's right. The speaker is also your commander-in-chief, he muttered. She has a lot more motive than you. Couldn't understand why you did it. I know she hates your kind, but I can't believe she would stoop that low. She's a fanatic, I know the type. She believes she's doing what's right, and that makes her dangerous. It was evident the speaker had meant to pit the fleet and the humans against each other, and frighteningly enough it almost worked. Her actions jeopardize the safety of not only the Terrans, but of her own forces and the Devourer civilians as well. Anger simmered inside of me at the thought of confronting her. I wasn't sure what we would do, but holding her accountable was now my highest priority. She's dangerous to all of us as long as she's leading the Federation. Please, unless you still want me to leave, let us help. Ula needs to pay. We'd graciously accept your assistance and welcome you aboard the flagship. Our differences with the humans had been smoothed over, which was a relief. But I couldn't say the ease with which Rykov accused me of betrayal didn't sting, especially after the recent trials we had faced together. Clearly, the trust I bestowed in him was not a mutual feeling. "We'll dock right away," I replied. "But first, you really thought I would sabotage you? Get your people killed?" The commander offered a sad smile. "If I've learned one thing in my time as a commander, it's that you never really know anyone. But for what it's worth, I am sorry, General. I never should have accused you." My bitterness dissipated as I saw the glint of wetness in his eyes. A pang of pity stabbed through my heart as I realized the poor man didn't trust a soul. Expecting his confidence after being acquainted for mere days was perhaps too much to ask. Apology accepted. It was easy enough to whip a crowd into a frenzy, as long as you knew what they wanted to hear. The people who turned up to my rally today were a fearful bunch. The battle footage revealed the Terrans for charlatans they were, and their centuries-long deception would not be forgotten by the masses. They had festered within our ranks, scheming, manipulating our politics to unknown ends, propaganding their vile culture. A species as warlike as humanity was like a tumor, consuming all that was natural and good, lest it be excised. I had faith that the people could recognize the monster lurking in their midst. My speech today was just giving the citizenry the push they needed. If the commoners directed their anger at the humans, it would force their hand. Terran soldiers striking down civilians on the street would pay well in the media, and combined with the news of the Devourer massacre that would be coming in at any moment, the outcry might be enough to oust them from the Federation. When I was a young girl, humanity was a species noted in our civics class as the greatest diplomats, the peacekeepers. I paused, my gaze sweeping over the crowd. But recently, we learned that was all a lie. They are brutal, bloodthirsty. They are not like us, and they do not share our values. The values that hold our Federation together. A few cheers rippled through the assembly, but most onlookers looked anxious. That was exactly the sort of sentiment I hoped to evoke. There was no more powerful motivation than fear. I knew I had their apt attention, and that they would hang on my every word. My friends, rest assured. I share your shock and confusion at the news, but of this I am certain. We must act now. Humans prowl our streets, and it is a matter of time until they give in to their instincts. How many of you have welcomed one into your homes, sent your children to school with one? Horrified expressions, agitated murmuring, this was the response I had hoped for. Most of the people here had had contact with a Terran at least once. Undoubtedly, some listeners would be hesitant to judge humanity, but a reminder of the mortal dangers human represented should scare some sense into them. What are we going to do? What are you going to do? My voice dropped to a low growl. Say it with me, loud enough for them to hear you all the way back on Earth. Humans are not welcome here. Humans are not welcome here, the crowd shouted. A smile stretched across my face. That's a beautiful sound. Now, the Terran embassy is on this very street. We are minutes from here. It defiles our capital with its presence. Why don't you make your voices heard down there? Let's go take back what's ours. Cheers of agreement came in response, and I watched with content as the people turned their side on the gated complex down the road. It was no accident that I had selected an outdoor venue for this event, mere minutes on foot from the Terran embassy. There would be no time for the humans to prepare. An angry mob, numbering in the thousands, would overrun their security quickly, and then they would be forced to take more drastic measures. I fished my holopad out of my pocket as the crowd marched off. The next item on my agenda was to make contact with General Kilon and learn what had become of the Terran's rescue mission. Thanks to my meddling, they should have no choice but to resort to violence. The general often sympathized with the humans, likely out of gratitude for them saving his life. If anything could change his mind, it would be the slaughter of an entire planet. He would no longer see humanity as saviors, but as the monsters they truly were. My call to the fleet was either not received or not answered. A small seed of doubt was planted in my mind as I considered the possibility that the Terrans had struck them down in retribution. There was no way they could know that I had done once the ship were lost, of course. But what if they had blamed the fleet anyways? Or just not wanted any witnesses to the massacre? The thought chilled me to the bone. I had to hope that the general was simply occupied with other matters and would return my call soon enough. Whatever happened to the human ships, I could care less, but the loss of our servicemen would be tragic. Perhaps my actions had been a bit careless. It was too late now to turn back, though. Some people were bound to get hurt dealing with such an aggressive species, but the sacrifice was necessary for the greater good. Today's events were the perfect example of that principle. I doubted the chaos unfolding at the embassy would be bloodless. One of my staffers had tipped off Federation News Central, telling them to keep a camera crew posted at the Terran embassy. The media might have missed the start of the demonstration otherwise. I switched to the live stream on my holopad and was pleased to see coverage of the protest already rolling. 2 human sentries were placing inside the gates, shouting for everyone to stand back. The crowd jeered at them in response, lobbing rocks and other projectiles over the barriers. A young Sonic reporter gestured at the scene behind him. As you can see, the situation at the Terran embassy is escalating. Speaker Ula gave a short speech this afternoon, laden with anti-human rhetoric. Her supporters felt inspired to take action, and at the speaker's encouragement, traveled out to the complex here. It appears a confrontation is imminent. A few protesters began scaling the walls, and the Terran guards pointed guns at them in response. Undeterred, the climbers dropped down on the other side. I chuckled to myself. The moment the humans opened fire on unarmed civilians, everyone would see them as I did. This incident would be broadcast live across the galaxy, and it would be played on repeat for days, just as a nanite bomb had been. More civilians descended onto the premises. The guards took a few steps back, weapons still raised. Their fingers hovered by the trigger, ready to fire the moment a protester advanced. The crowd closed its ranks, then charged together. Rather than the sound of gunfire, all I heard was a human voice shout to fall back. Inexplicably, the guards holstered their weapons and retreated into the building. "Why aren't they shooting?" I screamed. "This isn't right. Humans are supposed to be murderers." My staffers, who were huddled nearby, were caught off guard by my outburst. They were staring at me like I had lost my mind. A young male named Ruddy looked particularly concerned. "You want them to shoot? Are you okay?" I glared at him. "Mind your own damn business. I'm perfectly fine." The protesters had broken into the embassy itself while I wasn't paying attention and were no longer visible to the camera. The anchor said something about a hostage situation, but it didn't register in my mind. How could this have happened? An aggressive, militarized species giving up without a fight? This was an absolute disaster. With the diplomats taken captive, the humans would be framed as the victims of the story. I could hear it now, a Terran on the news telling the viewers that they weren't the violent ones. It would distract from the atrocity of the weapons, and instead, the controversy would focus on me inciting the riot. This was the kind of scandal that could cripple the average politician's career. But I was no less a representative. Surely, a speaker as popular as myself would weather the storm. Rather than apologizing for my actions, I would double down. With the very soul of the Federation at stake, giving up on my quest to unmask humanity was not an option. Hopefully, my efforts to sabotage the rescue mission had fared better. One incident was all I needed to prove my case, and I knew if the humans were bound to slip up eventually. It was in their nature, after all. The atmosphere on board the Terran flagship was much different from my previous visit. The commander left me in a meeting room with 2 armed guards while he spoke with Terran intelligence about Ula's treachery. He claimed it was for my protection, but judging by their demeanor, that wasn't exactly the truth. The duo watched me with suspicious eyes the entire time, never cracking a smile or saying a word. Thankfully, Rykov wasn't gone for long. I couldn't help but notice his face was creased with worry when he returned. Whatever he had just learned, I had a feeling it wasn't good news. "You're back. Did they say what they're going to do about the sabotage?" I asked. The commander sighed. "Earth has bigger problems to deal with, apparently." My antenna twitched in confusion. It could be bigger than treason. They have to do something about the speaker. "They agree that something has to be done, but she's on their radar for other reasons," he replied. "She's been encouraging acts of violence against our civilians. There's been enough incidents the past few days that Earth has closed its spaceports. We can't risk a terror attack on our soil." "Terror attack?" I figured the phrase must be some Terran military jargon I was unfamiliar with. What does that mean? Commander Rykov's eyes widened. "You don't... Well, it's a form of violence against civilians, mass casualty events that are planned, done publicly, and meant to frighten a certain group of people." The fact that the Terrans had a term designated for such an attack implied that they occurred with some regularity. I shuddered at the notion of civilians slaughtered in broad daylight for sole purpose of cruelty. For all the wars the Yatari fought in the early years, the violence was never so senseless. Yet the commander spoke of these terror attacks as though they were just something that happened, like a natural disaster. "Why are you looking at me like that?" Rykov scowled, crossing his arms. "Don't you dare try and act like that stuff never happens in the Federation." I shifted awkwardly. "Well, it doesn't." "That's not how I see it. You know our embassy is in the federal capital?" He paused, waiting for my nod. "Demonstrators stormed it, took the diplomats hostage. Now they're holed up inside, threatening to blow the place to the high heavens if we make a move." "What? Why would they do that? Humans have been nothing but kind to us. There's no reason for bloodshed." Try telling them that to them. The way I see it, they're terrorists. But that's still the subject of debate back home. We should be taking the embassy back, not trying to negotiate with these people. They won't even talk to anyone that's human. I could sense that there was something Rykov wasn't telling me. He cared for the people under his command, and for the preservation of life in general, but never to the point where you could hear it in his voice. If this mission was personal to him, I needed to know why. He was a competent commander, but nothing could cloud one's judgment like emotions. Quickly, music. Yeah. "I don't mean to pry, but..." I placed a hand on his shoulder and noticed the guards tense up at the contact. "Do you know someone there?" "Was it that obvious?" "Yeah. My brother lives at the embassy. He works for the State Department," Rykov replied. I frowned. "Maybe we can help somehow. What are your orders?" "Well, first they need to return to Earth with the refugees. I asked to join up with the tactical team outside the embassy, but was told, and I quote, "You're too close to this. The bigwigs really expect me to sit this one out? Orders are orders. We'll have to think of a plan after you get home. 2 steps ahead of you, General. I said that you offered to help, and that you asked for me to escort you to the embassy. It would be an insult to the Atari if I refused. And what do you know? Permission was granted. You lied to your superiors? My brother's life is on the line. I didn't lie. I just stretched the truth. That is the definition of lying. Not the point. Anyhow, the flagship will set off for the capital immediately, and the other ships will bring the refugees back to Earth. I won't force you to go, but I would appreciate your help. Will you join us?" There was no question that I should accompany the commander. It went beyond owing him my life, or considering him a friend. After the Speaker's betrayal of the Federation's abandonment, the humans needed to see that they still had allies. They needed to know they were not alone. "Of course. It's the least I can do," I answered. Rykov smiled. "Excellent. Let's head over to the bridge and we'll warp out." The guards were at my side in a heartbeat, pushing me forwards like I was some sort of cattle. My patience for the prisoner treatment was growing thin. I was keen on aiding the humans, but not at the expense of my dignity. I did my best to imitate Rykov's arm-crossed pose, glaring at the one on the right. "Hands off, I'm taken." The man's burly figure was intimidating, and I had no doubt that he could pound me to a pulp in the scuffle. I knew my rebuke might only lead to a rougher treatment down the line, but I met his eyes anyways. I expected an irritated look on his face, but instead I saw the hint of a smirk playing on his lips. "You managed to make Max smile, General. Even I can't do that," the commander chuckled. Max snorted. "That's because you're not funny." "Hey, watch yourself now." Rykov's tone was light and playful, so I doubted his warning was serious. "The General is right there. He's quite capable of walking on his own." Mac nodded, stepping back. His partner followed suit, dropping off a few paces behind us. My thoughts drifted as we passed through the narrow corridors to the bridge. I wished the commander would have dismissed the guards altogether, but I'd settled for having them out of my personal space. If the humans still didn't trust me, that was their problem. "You look upset. I'm sorry. It's actually not you," Rykov said. "I have round-the-clock security now. An anti-human extremist group put a 1,000,000 credit bounty on my head." My straight faltered, a shock seared through my veins. "What? Why you?" He sighed. "Because I'm the one who fired the nanite bomb." We fell into a comfortable silence as we entered the bridge. My mind was still reeling from the latest revelation. If there was a 1,000,000 credit bounty out on me, I wouldn't trust my own crew not to take me out. For the commander to wonder about the ship at all, he must possess unwavering faith in his men's loyalty. On my last visit to the flagship, the bridge had been swept up in a chaotic flurry of activity and chatter, at least before Rykov called them to attention. But today, the crewmates were already waiting at their posts, and of course was already plotted into the computer. Seeing the somber expressions around me, I feared the past few days had zapped the human spirit. "All right, it looks like we're ready. Course is already input for the capital system." Rykov nodded with satisfaction. "Engage warp drive." My stomach lurched as the ship slipped into hyperspace. Even after years of experience with FTL travel, the nausea never went away. Memories of newly enlisted Federation soldiers puking their guts out floated through my mind, and I laughed to myself. The commander glanced up from his holomap, likely confused what there was to be amused about at a time like this. Before I could ask what I found so funny, a stern voice cracked over the emergency frequency. "Turn back at once. Unauthorized Terran ships are prohibited from entry to Federation space until further notice." Rykov frowned, pressing a few buttons on his display. "Since when? You do realize we are members of the Federation, so I don't see how we can be denied access to Federation space." "Earth halted interplanetary flights earlier today. The Senate passed a temporary freeze on Terran visitors in response, came the reply. For all we know, you shut down your spaceports because you're planning an attack. That's ridiculous, Rykov protested. Look, we're here on a rescue mission. We're going to dock, and you're not going to get in our way. You are trespassing in the system. If you enter real space, you will be fired upon. What's that? You're breaking up. I can't hear you. The commander ended the transmission, shaking his head in disgust. Idiots. Raise shields to full power and enter real space. I felt the ship shudder beneath my feet as it emerged from hyperspace, and my expression morphed into one of horror. No, you must turn back. The planetary defense system, they'll shoot you down. I'd like to see them try, Rykov growled. Well, this was just wonderful. It seems Speaker Ula might be getting her wish for a war with the humans after all. That's kinda getting quite out of hand. The planetary defense system for the Federation's capital world was designed to ward off an orbital bombardment and consisted of state-of-the-art weaponry. This was the most heavily guarded planet in the galaxy, given its political and symbolic importance. With all of their firepower turned against a single ship, there was no way conventional shields could withstand the blast. I feared the humans had bit off more than they could chew. How would the Terran government retaliate for the destruction of their fleet's crown jewel? It was unclear whether they would stick to the concept of a proportional response. An outright declaration of war could be imminent, especially if the Federation fired the first shots. It seemed common sense from my perspective that provocation of the humans was not in our best interest. Earth was signed onto, and in many cases the founder of treaties had prohibited attacks on civilians. But if pushed to the brink, who knew what they were capable of? Just a single nanite bomb dropped against their metropolitan populace. The casualties would number in the millions. Not that I would be around to worry about the consequences. In a few moments, I would be vaporized, alongside every other occupant of this vessel. Gazing through the flagship's viewport, I saw an azure glow spreading across the lunar surface. That indicated the orbital laser was charging up. It was capable of emitting the same amount of energy as a medium-sized star, at least for a few seconds. A hit that powerful would pass through our shields as though they were non-existent. Any hopes I had of escaping this situation alive evaporated. I thought they would fire the lunar station's plasma railguns, or their guided missiles, as was typical the protocol for a space intrusion. The orbital laser was the capital's last line of defense, which seemed rather overkill for a single vessel. Was there any way to convince Commander Rykov to turn back? This is suicide! You must stand down or we are all dead! I hated the note of desperation in my voice, which crept higher in pitch as I spoke. You can talk to the Federation later, work something out! The commander straightened, the glint of bitterness in his eyes. The time for talking is over. We've tried talking for hundreds of years, and look how well that worked out for us. The Federation needs to learn a lesson in humility. Look, I agree that this is an act of war. If I were in your place, I would respond in kind too. But you need more ships, and a solid plan. Our death won't achieve anything, I pleaded. He waved a hand dismissively. I'm not planning on dying today, General. We'll be fine. It occurred to me that Rykov either did not grasp the gravity of the threat, or that his recent skirmishes had led to overconfidence. Whatever fortifications the flagship had, there was no way they were designed to be subjected to such extreme forces. Warning. A target lock against the ship has been detected. Estimated time of impact, 5 seconds. A computerized voice said. I squeezed my eyes shut, waiting for permanent darkness to overtake me. The sound of trilling alarms rang in my ears, and I wondered if it would be the last thing I heard. There was no fear in my mind, just a burning hatred for the fools running the federal government. This loss of life could have been avoided, if only the speaker behaved with sensibility. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. My eyes shot open as a jolt passed through the ship, and I nearly lost my balance in its wake. The lights flickered overhead, presumably from power being rerouted to shields, but that was the only side effect of the blast I noticed. There were no fires breaking out on the bridge, no systems knocked offline. Shields at 96%, structural integrity uncompromised. Retaliatory action advised, the computer intoned. I couldn't understand how the flagship was still in one piece. That orbital laser was designed to overpower an entire formation, yet it hardly scratched the Terran craft. All it had achieved was a tiny dent to the shield capacity. Humanity's meekness, and why they had hidden their true nature for so long, was more baffling than ever. Their vessels were nigh invincible, and their technology outpaced the Federation's weaponry by centuries. What was it that differentiated humans from other aggressive species? They could rule the galaxy if they so desired, but instead they moralized and mediated. Commander Rykov cleared his throat. That was your most powerful weapon, General? You people need us more than you realize. I suppose nothing should surprise me anymore, I grumbled. What now? They're going to fire again once the laser is recharged. The human tilted his head, as though weighing his options. The station is remotely operated? A sensor scan of the moon detected 0 life signatures. Yes, to my knowledge, I answered. Good. In that case, we are going to make sure they don't have the chance to fire again. He clapped his hands together, and predatory grin on his face. Ensign Carter, ready the antimatter missiles. I want you to bury that station. Understood there, sir? Came the reply from the weapons post. I felt strangely detached, watching a trio of warheads close the distance between us and the station. My oath as a soldier was to protect and defend the Federation against all enemies, and it seemed that Terrans could now be classified as a hostile party. After all, without the planetary defense system, the capital would be left vulnerable to attack. By taking no action during this engagement, I was siding with the humans, wasn't I? The missile slammed into the lunar surface with a radiant flash, churning up plumes of dust and debris. Where a sophisticated defense complex once stood, only 3 craters remained. The aftermath was reminiscent of an asteroid strike, rather than a missile, given the magnitude of its depth. Staring at the fresh gash in the stony ground, I wondered yet again why the Federation was hell-bent on angering the humans. Creatures with such a mystery of destruction should be appeased, not aggravated, unless your objective was the eradication of your civilization. The low whir of machinery sounded from behind me, and I flinched on instinct. Whipping around, I spotted a robotic cart stuck with firearms wheeling across the bridge, and the Terran personnel gearing up as it passed by. Commander Rykov withdrew a scope plasma rifle, and without a word handed it to me. Its weight was much heavier than I expected, and my shoulders sagged as I accepted it. Either the humans were sporting some sort of power armor, or their physical strength greatly exceeded that of my species. General, I think we are going to have to find our way to Embassy once we dock. Between protesters and the Federation security forces, we'll be outnumbered, the commander said. You know the layout of the capital better than us. Any suggestions? I paused, tossing a few ideas around my head. Well, a diversion would help. Do you have chemical weapons on the flagship? I assume the protesters are packed close together outside the embassy, so you could hit them with some sort of gas attack. When the emergency hovercraft respond to the scene, you can use them as a shield from the special forces. I expected the human to appreciate the resourcefulness of my plan, but instead he was looking at me like I'd grown a fourth eye. His mouth opened and closed a few times as though he was struggling to find the words. We're not doing that, he replied at last. Please, forget I asked. Whatever his problem with my suggestion was, it escaped my comprehension. Not only would it minimize human casualties, but it would also provide cover in a dense urban landscape. A wide open avenue wasn't exactly ideal for ground combat and maneuvering. The flagship began a rapid descent through the planet's atmosphere, hurtling past silvery clouds. The computer's display stated that it had locked on to the landing beacon, and I steeled myself to face whatever lay ahead. As we neared our destination, I finally caught a glimpse of the ground below us on screen. I had known that we would likely need to find our way out of the spaceport before we could head toward the embassy. It came as no surprise then when I spotted the contingent of soldiers filing into the hangar bay, weapons ready. However, I had not been expecting them to number in the hundreds, and to be solely comprised of Xanic servicemen. This was no ordinary security force. That could make our mission more difficult than expected. I just hoped Commander Rykov had a plan, because against a unit of that size, I didn't have the slightest idea how to escape the spaceport alive. Commander Rykov's orders had been not to engage the Xenic soldiers unless they shot first, but I had expected them to open fire as soon as we exited the flagship. Instead, they were milling about the spacious terminal, guns pointed at the tiled floor rather than at us. One individual immediately caught my eye. His striking dark blue feathers and pronounced beak suggested he was of noble lineage. Unlike the others, he was wearing his dress uniform rather than combat gear. I could have sworn I'd seen him in the media, though I couldn't quite place him. Was he some politician or general? If so, what in the stars was he doing out in the field? The human commander followed my gaze, and recognition flashed through his eyes as he spotted the Xanic nobleman. "At ease, Ambassador Castle, what is it?" The Terran soldiers flanking us dropped back at the new orders, relaxing their stance. I stared in disbelief at Ambassador Castle. Planetary ambassadors were only present at events of major significance, and for most Federation species, they were considered the highest-ranking dignitaries in the government. An ambassador accompanying a security detail to a hostile confrontation? That was simply unheard of. Castle chuckled, a low rumbling sound. "You want to get to the Terran embassy, yes? I think my personal security detail will be a sufficient escort." "You're not here to stop us?" Rykov asked, raising an eyebrow skeptically. "Of course not. Earth is our largest foreign creditor and also a major trading partner. It will cripple our economy for decades to go to war with you," the ambassador replied. Sorry. The human shook his head, a smirk on his face. "Let me get this straight. You're helping us not because we're allies or because the Federation's behavior is unjust, but for money?" "Exactly." I see why our governments get along so well." A note of amusement punctuated the commander's words. "You do realize that the Federation could go to war with you for helping us, don't you?" "War? With what army? If you leave, the other military species will follow." Kazil stretched a talon toward me. "It seems you've already won over the Yatari anyways. You've turned the highest-ranking Federation general into your errand boy." My blood burned at the insult, and I raised my plasma rifle at the ambassador's head. "Errand boy, I dare you to say that again!" Commander Rykov reached over, prying the weapon from my grasp. "General, I would appreciate it if you didn't shoot our only ally in the Senate." I clenched my teeth, feeling the veins bulge in my neck. Was the commander really taking his side? Assaulting the Xenic ambassador wouldn't be the smartest move, especially while surrounded by his soldiers, but his haughty attitude was insufferable. "Yes, you should listen to the human," Castle said, a triumphant look in his eyes. Rykov wagged a finger at the ambassador. Don't look so smug, you're out of line too. Trying to get under the Atari skin. The general and I both have a score to settle with a certain someone. He's not my subordinate. Relax, I was just having a bit of fun. The Atari I've owned way too high. Too tight, he responded. Who is this certain someone? Well, our business with her is unofficial, if you understand what I mean. Rykov traced a hand down the barrel of my confiscated rifle, a dark look on his face. We want to track down Speaker Ulla. That do say? I wasn't too familiar with Xanic profanity, but I believe Duce loosely translate to intestine brain. She shouldn't be hard to find. Ulla's on the Senate floor as we speak, raising a motion for the Terran Union's removal from the Federation. The Senate is in session now and you're not there? He grumbled. I have better things to do. I like Kessel. Kessel looked at me for a moment, then turned his gaze back to the commander. Frankly, I don't know why Ambassador Johnson attended. I guess she likes listening to grandstanding idiots. Rykov laughed. It probably reminds her of home. In all seriousness, though, do you think the motion will pass? Does Ulla have the votes? The ambassador hesitated. I don't know. There's a lot of representatives on the fence, but your attack on the capital probably tips the scales in the speaker's favor. Our attack? The Federation fired the first shots, the commander protested. It doesn't matter. That's not how Ulla will tell it. Khalil glanced at his holopad, avoiding the human's gaze. Enough chit-chat. We should start off toward the embassy. Rykov nodded and handed me back my firearm. Our posse trailed behind the Xanic security detail as we exited the spaceport in a brisk fashion. A few humans stayed behind on the flagship to guard it, and if necessary, lift off to await its capture. But most of the crew had disembarked for this mission. I assumed for most of the humans this would be their first time seeing the capital in person. Even after hundreds of visits, I still found the city-state a sight to behold. In the emerald glow of the setting sun, the capital's architecture took on an ethereal quality. On the horizon rested the Hall of Governance, an intricate blue spheroid that housed the Senate and the Military Commando Center. The rest of the buildings encircled the hall. All Federation species were given a stretch of land, with the founding members' territory nestled in the inner ring. Embassies were often wedged between shops and cultural sites, giving each region of the city a distinct flair. The Terran's Corner was famed for its street vendors and nightlife, but today the market stalls were abandoned. A crowd of non-human protesters numbering in the thousands packed the streets. The mob seemed agitated. Barricades lined the avenue to thwart their advance on the embassy. A wall of human police camped behind the barriers, pushing back any demonstrators who tried to cross the threshold. I say police in quotation marks, because they were dressed head to toe in black combat gear, an outfit identical to that of the Terran soldier. The only path to the embassy was through the Thong, and a few of the protesters had already noticed our presence. What's a throng? A group of them splintered off and charged towards us, wielding blunt weapons and makeshift projectiles. It was evident that we needed to get the demonstrators out of our way, or they would overwhelm us with sheer numbers. The same thought must have crossed Ambassador Castle's mind, because with a whistle, he signaled for his men to drop into a firing position. The Xanic soldiers found the target, talons hovering over the trigger. Stop! What is wrong with you people? Rykov shrieked, sounding almost hysterical. I offered him a sympathetic smile. There's no other way. Ambassador Castle gestured agreement, looking baffled by the human's outburst. The commander wordlessly removed the silencer from his rifle, paying no mind to approaching civilians. He aimed the barrel at the sky and fired 3 times in quick succession. I winced at the unmistakable ear-splitting pops. The protesters descending on our position scrambled backwards, and I heard screams from the crowd. "The humans are shooting at us!" one voice shouted. In a matter of seconds, the demonstrators dispersed, running for their lives. They scattered off into alleyways and storefronts, clearing the path for our unit. Commander Rykov sighed, lowering his weapon. There's always another way. A knot of shame settled in my stomach. If not for the commander, I would have stood by and watched a needless civilian massacre. Speaker Wooler really could not have been more wrong about the species. That much was obvious. The humans had no desire for death. Their first thought was always toward limiting casualties. Whatever bloodshed littered their history, they had changed. One of the police officers broke from his formation, marching down the street. He pushed his way past Oxanic soldiers, pointing an accusatory finger at Rykov. Why are you here? I told Terran Command not to let you come. The commander gasped, staring slack-jawed at the stranger. Pavel? I thought you were a hostage. The agency has ways in and out of the embassy. Pavel unclasped his helmet, revealing a face that looked like a younger version of Rykov. It really isn't good if any of us are captured. What is the agency? I demanded. This is your brother? Commander Rykov waved a hand dismissively. The State Department, I told you. And yes, this is my brother. Pavel, this is... Pavel smirked. I know, General Kilon, an honor. And unless I'm hallucinating, the Xanic ambassador is in your little band as well. We're at your service. On behalf of my government, we apologize for the Federation's recent actions, Castle said. No need. Since you're here, you guys might as well help. Rykov's brother gestured towards the embassy. I have a plan to sneak some hostages out our maintenance tunnel, but it needs a distraction. I couldn't shake the feeling that Pavel was more than just a State Department employee, though I decided not to express my doubts. What common diplomat would suit up in a militarized police force or be drawing up tactical plans to rescue hostages? It was a relief that the commander's brother was safe, but something told me I needed to watch him very closely. I forced a smile, trying to act normal. We can do that. Just let us know what you had in mind. Very slow loading. I glanced at my note cards one last time as I stepped to the lectern. There was a strange sense of giddiness fluttering in my heart. With the Terran flagship firing on our sacred capital, the evidence of human treachery was now apparent. The most worrying part was how easily our trillion-credit defense system had been obliterated. If that ship was here to conquer us, of course, there would be little Federation forces could do to stop them. But given how humanity liked to present itself as a docile, peaceful race on the galactic stage, it seemed more likely they would attempt to salvage the optics of their attacks. We needed to end our association with the Terran Union while we still had that option. Senators, friends, I come to you today with grave news. I paused, my gaze sweeping across the packed auditorium. It seemed that all of the representatives were present, barring the empty seat reserved for the Xanic ambassador. Our capital defenses were savagely bombed by an invading Terran ship, which is deploying ground troops as we speak. For anyone who believed long-term partnership with humanity was possible, you can now see that their intentions are anything but benevolent. Yatari Ambassador Palom rose to his feet, looking annoyed. If you poke a carrot, eventually it will bite. You would destroy the Federation, thrust us into a war to prove a point? Madam Speaker, remember that you brought this upon yourself. Leave it to the military species to jump to humanity's defense. Their brains were both wired for aggression, so no wonder they understood each other. Palom's analogy was unfitting, unless his implication was that humans were not sapient. Garrets were not a non-sapient predator species, indigenous to the Atari homeworld, that had been domesticated to herd cattle. If I didn't know better, I would say that sounds like a threat, I hissed. This is not about proving a point. This is about a bloodthirsty species that has weapons that pose an existential threat to our society. If raising legitimate concerns about humanity and trying to distance ourselves from them is a crime, then I am guilty. The Federation will never throw its lot in with a planet of murderers and liars, not under my watch. Many of the representatives were signaling agreement with their body language as I spoke. The Yatari ambassador appeared to struggle for a response before returning to his seat, shoulders slumped in defeat. While Pelham's immediate protest was no surprise, what was shocking was that the human ambassador hadn't said a word. A quick glance in her direction found her leaning forward in her chair, watching me with unblinking eyes. An involuntary shudder went down my spine, and I drew a deep breath to calm myself. If you believe that a species we now know has a history of systematic genocide, bloody wars and tyrannical regimes can change, then you will vote for them to remain in the Federation. I drew closer to the microphone, dropping my voice to a low whisper. All I wanted was for you to see that for all their lies and grand speeches, they have not changed. It was always a matter of time before they would turn their sights on us. I was rather taken aback when Ambassador Johnson stood, slowly clapping. Her applause seemed sarcastic in nature, especially with a smirk plastered on her face. I sighed, tapping a hoof with annoyance. Ambassador Johnson, do you have something to say? It is your right to reply, at least while Earth is still a member planet. I have plenty to say, but the question is whether any of you will listen, she replied. First off, the missile launched against your defense station was unauthorized. You're saying your ship went rogue? That's not exactly reassuring, I pointed out. What happens when the next one of your crews decides to go rogue? The human glared at me. You directly provoked a civilian assault on our embassy, and yet you throw stones. Terran government condemns Commander Rikov's actions, but it's a clear case of self-defense. Show the logs from the station's computer, Madam Speaker. You won't, because they show that you fired on the ships first. A series of anxious murmurs rippled across the chamber. I could tell Ambassador Johnson's words had planted seeds of doubt in some attendees' minds. I considered challenging the notion that her station had fired first, but I suspected that she would not make that claim without evidence. If the humans persuaded the representatives that it was a case of self-defense, there was a chance she would sway enough of the votes in her favor. The civilians acted of their own accord. I simply outright said humans weren't welcome here, condoned a race riot. And look, you're not disagreeing that your ship was fired upon. I concede that the orbital laser launched one volley against your vessel, but they were trespassing in our space and refused to leave. You do understand that the highest-ranking general in the Federation was among the passengers, and that ship was tasked with transporting him to the embassy, right? You assaulted a diplomatic rescue mission. Are we really the violent ones? I could sense the balance of the chamber shifting, and I cursed under my breath. Human diplomats were known to have a way with words, and excellent at backing their opponents into a corner. It was a struggle to maintain my composure faced with such accusatory rhetoric, but I knew if I lost my temper, it was equal to defeat. Yes, you are the violent ones. Care to comment on your history? A triumphant smile inched across my face. There was no way the ambassador could defend your species' past actions, which by galactic law could be classified as crimes against sentience. Your so-called world wars, and the brutal instances of ethnic cleansing. I've done my research since you launched that nanite bomb. Ambassador Johnson broke eye contact, a troubled frown crossing her lips. We regret those years deeply. Humanity had to learn the hard way, that violence is not the answer, and we nearly destroyed ourselves in the process. For all the time you've known us, we have not been that species. I urge you to recall all the good we have done in our history with the Federation, not just the evil of our primitive years. Who accepts the most refugees of any planet each year? Who sends medics to help both sides of a conflict? Who sponsors bills on sentient rights and wrote the galactic laws concerning war crimes? I don't know what else we can do to prove that we are peaceful. You can stop building nanite bombs for one. We only use those to protect our friends. That's right. Even after all this nonsense, we still see you as friends. The time of your games is over, Madam Speaker. We have bigger problems on our hands, fighting a homicidal AI. Instead of sabotaging us at every turn, why don't you help us? Calls of assent came from around the hall, and I gritted my teeth in frustration. For every point I made, it seemed the ambassador had a pre-prepared response at the ready. There was no way I could tolerate the Terran Union presence among us any longer. Humans were despicable creatures. How did the others not see the truth, even after an attack on the capital? As I was trying to think of a response, a panicked Tujili messenger burst into the chamber. Madam Speaker, please forgive me for interrupting, but you weren't answering your holopad. We are under attack. Hundreds of battleships are descending on the capital and our defenses are obviously offline. You did this, I screeched, pointing at Ambassador Johnson. I knew it! The human held up her hands defensively, appearing genuinely confused. It's not us, really. What? Rogue ships again? Hundreds of them? I sneered. They're not Terran Union ships. In fact, the transponders identified them as ours, the messenger said. Pandemonium erupted among the Senate body, with dozens of representatives shouting questions at once. As far as I was concerned, humanity had to be behind this somehow. Perhaps they had hacked our military craft? I pounded a hoof against the floor, attempting to restore order. Silence! Have the attackers fired on us? Have they broadcast demands? No. No shots fired yet. But they told us we have 1 hour to surrender unconditionally, he answered. I glanced back at Ambassador Johnson, trying to gauge her response. She was staring at the empty seat belonging to the Xenic Republic, as though some revelation had occurred to her. I could have sworn the words she muttered were, "Damn it, Castle!" The human hesitated, her gaze sweeping across the chamber. Her eyes stopped on me, and I could see the unspoken question in them. She wanted the satisfaction of hearing me beg for assistance, a groveling apology. But even if she had been truly unaware of the Xenic's intentions, surely their assault would force the Terran Union's hand. So, what are you going to do, Ambassador? Seize a chance to take us over? I asked, voice dripping with contempt. Ambassador Johnson snorted. You have a funny way of asking for help. A bitter laugh rumbled in my throat. Why would you help us? Because, as I've been telling you, we are not what you think we are. Now, I have a call to make to a certain commander that invading floodship just might come in handy. She's got quite a few tricks up her sleeve. After a brief moment of hesitation, I gave the ambassador a grudging nod. A human gesture, which was a concession on its own. I didn't trust an offer of assistance from humanity of our species, but under the present circumstances, there was no choice but to accept it. It remained to be seen if the Terran Union would actually confront its greatest ally, but I wouldn't be holding my breath. No mission ever went according to plan when humans were involved. Not that the plan was particularly sane to begin with, given that Powell's distraction involved shooting rockets into the sky. I wasn't sure how lighting explosives were a good idea, unless the goal was for the humans to blow up the embassy themselves, but Commander Rykov ordered his men to set up the launch, seemingly oblivious to how bizarre his brother's suggestion was. "How exactly shooting bombs into the air going to help?" I asked, unable to contain my doubts any longer. The commander chuckled. "Not bombs, fireworks." I gave him a blank stare, unable to understand what he found amusing. "So these rockets have a name. I don't see how that detracts from my point." "They are recreational explosive. Harmless, mostly." "Recreational explosives," I echoed. "What does that even mean?" "People shoot them off on holidays to celebrate. They're loud, explode in a bright flash of color, but that's about it. Come to Earth on Unification Day, you'll see plenty of them." "That is supposed to be fun?" "Yes." "Aye. Our species clearly have very different ideas of fun." "Well, fun or not, it should draw the terrorists out to investigate. I take it they'll be as confused as you are." A trail of orange embers arched through the night sky, resembling a cluster of shooting stars. A few cheers came from the Terran soldiers, most of whom were admiring the light show overhead. I winced at the volume of the burst. I wasn't fully convinced that the fire wasn't going to rain down on our position. The Xenic patrolmen seemed outright frightened, with many ducking for cover. Commander Rykov smirked, clearly trying not to laugh at a terrified Ambassador Castle. "Relax, it's perfectly safe." Castle rubbed his beak nervously. I'm happy you guys decided to join the bombing run, but I wish you waited until we were out in the open." "Bombing run?" Rykov and I asked in unison. "You haven't heard? Pretty soon this rock will be a joint property of the Terran Union and the Xenic Republic." Castle glanced in my direction, observing the shocked look on my face. "Don't worry, General. I'm sorry the Atari will be wise enough to jump ship." It seemed the ambassador's implication was that the Terrans and the Xenic were teaming up to invade the capital. As wrong as it felt to abandon the Federation, I was sworn to protect. Siding against Earth in a war was tantamount to suicide. The Yotari more than likely would opt for self-preservation, as would I, which is why it didn't make sense for the commander to lie about his intentions. I frowned at my human friend. "So you are attacking the Federation? Your plan was to take over the capital all along." "Absolutely not," the commander growled. "There's zero chance Earth signed on to this." "Not yet, but we expect the full support of the Terran Union. Who needs to listen to this weak-minded Federation fools any longer?" Ambassador Castle flinched as another firework detonated above, but did not falter. "Their wealth, their power, it is ours to claim. Surely you see the wisdom?" The human raised his rifle, eyes narrowing to slits. "Wisdom? I only see greed. Whatever you are planning, call it off." The nearby Xenic soldiers pointed their weapons at the commander in response, and the Terran troops readied their guns as well. I hesitated to join the standoff, but I figured I would get caught in the crossfire anyways. Despite the fact that the humans were outnumbered 10-1, I aimed my rifle at Castle. I hadn't liked him from the moment we met, and I wasn't going to miss a chance to take him out. "It's too late. We've broadcast our demands to the Federation, and if we don't follow through, it will bring shame to our people," the ambassador said. "If you do follow through, you will live just long enough to see your soldiers die by our hands." A new voice came from behind me. It was Pavel, who seemed to have materialized out of nowhere. "We will overthrow your leaders, crash your economy, and fund insurgents. Then we'll claim we had nothing to do with it, and your pleas to the Federation will fall on deaf ears. You'll never have a lick of proof that we're involved in any way." Fierce words for a diplomat of all people, when you're supposed to be in the embassy, freeing the hostages. Pavel inched closer to the ambassador. New orders came in. At first glance, Rakov's brother appeared unarmed, but something about his posture struck me as odd. Upon closer inspection, I noticed he was holding one arm behind his back, concealing an object from Kazel's view. The commander glanced at his wristwatch, hearing the chime of a notification. I just got new orders as well. This is primarily a civilian populace, and the Terran government will not tolerate you bombing them into submission. Either you stand down, or I am to take you in as a prisoner of war. We did this for you, for humanity. We were the first to stand at your side, and this is our reward? Kazel chittered. The Federation betrayed you. They are not worthy of your allegiance. Last chance. Surrender, Rakov hissed. Can't do that. Very well. Soldiers on my command. Take out all the hostile forces. I want the ambassador taken alive. Commander Rakov paused, spotting his brother slinking toward the Xenic line. Pavel, what are you doing? Sorry, Mikhail. We have different orders. In one fluid movement, Pavel pounced onto the ambassador, drawing a dagger faster than my eye could track him. He sliced through the vital arteries in Kazel's neck with a clean cut, leaving the politician spluttering blood. Plasma fire erupted around me, and I pulled my rifle's trigger on instinct. I could hear Commander calling for air support, presumably from the flagship, and the Terran troops relaying orders. A human hand pulled me to the ground, and I gasped as a plasma beam whizzed by right where my head had been. I glanced back to see Mac, who was picking off Xenic soldiers with calm precision. The realization that he had likely saved my life was not lost on me, and I gave him a small nod of acknowledgement. Drawing a deep breath, I decided to collect my bearings, acquire a target, eliminate the target, rinse and repeat. Simple. I spotted a Xenic soldier crouched behind a police barricade, propping up a rocket-propelled grenade. Time slowed to a crawl as I peered through my scope, lining her up with my crosshair. Steadying my hand, I pressed the trigger. The round scorched through the flesh of her forehead, and she crumbled to the ground in a heap. An explosion detonated a few paces away from my position, taking out 2 humans. Clearly, the combatant I had eliminated wasn't the only one with an RPG. Perhaps it would be wisest to move out of the open road before I was shelled to death. I noticed a small group of Terran soldiers off to my left, sheltering behind a market stall. Joining them would probably be the safest bet. We could hunker down there until the air support arrived. Rising to my feet, I darted in their direction. I had only made it a few steps when a sharp pain tore through my side, and I cascaded to the ground. Glancing down, I saw a small hole etched into my stomach. The flesh was still sizzling around the edges. Blood spurted from the wound, staining my uniform a sticky shade of green. I tried to move, but my body refused to obey. "General!" Commander Rakov scrambled out of an alleyway and was at my side in a flash. He wrapped his arms underneath my shoulder, dragging me to safety. "It's going to be okay. I'm here." The concern in his eyes told a different story. "Your plans are all stupid," I coughed, smiling weakly. The human laughed, wiping away a tear. Yes, they are." I stared up at the stars shining in the night sky, admiring their static beauty. The chaos of the battlefield was growing fainter, as though my ears no longer registered the sound. It was calm, quiet, still. Perhaps death was not the fiend I feared it to be. I felt at peace for the first time in a long time, ready to drift off into the night. Darkness crept in at the corners of my vision, and the world faded away. And I think I will stop here for today, because this is quite the ending. I hope that they have, or that SpacePaladin15 has something in store for Kilon, because I do quite like the character he made. And Keelan and Rykov have a wonderful dynamic. So I'm going to see who we can raid. Well, that was a fun little reading stream, I think. We still have a few chapters to go. I may be able to stream tomorrow since it is a holiday for me still. Read a few more chapters. Oh, I know who to raid. We are going to raid Athena Atlas. If it lets me. There. They are currently playing Elder Scrolls Online. And you guys know I love Elder Scrolls Online, so I hope you will enjoy it. Thank you very much for joining me here today. I had a lot of fun reading this. And although I mess up a lot of words, I do hope that I'm getting better at reading. And I do hope that you guys enjoy it as well. I hope you were able to have a comfortable and relaxing morning or afternoon, whatever time it is for you, and are going to have a wonderful rest of your Sunday. And if you have to work tomorrow again, a wonderful start into your week. I hope your whole week, your whole time until New Year and beyond is filled with lots of love, kindness and respect. Not just because it's Christmas, but because you are worth it every day of your life. Thank you very much for all the support and for being here, even though it is a Sunday, morning, lunchtime. I know that most people are busy at this time or asleep, time zones and all. Thank you very much. Stay awesome and see you next time, which is probably tomorrow for more story. Bye.